James had always been curious about the world around him. From a young age, he liked exploring the forests, hills, and rivers near his town. He loved the quiet of nature, the way sunlight filtered through the leaves, and how small animals went about their lives without noticing him. People in the town often told him to be careful, but James never liked staying in one place for too long. He felt that the real world, the one filled with danger, beauty, and mystery, was outside the fences of safety that most people built around themselves. One late afternoon after school, James packed a small bag with a few essentials: a water bottle, a notebook, a flashlight, and some snacks. He wanted to explore a part of the forest that was deeper and less visited. Locals often spoke of that area as dangerous, with steep rocks, sudden drops, and dense undergrowth. But James didn't think of it as dangerous. To him, it was alive. The trees seemed taller here, the air fresher, and the sounds of birds and insects more vibrant. He walked for hours, his boots crunching over fallen leaves and twigs. He took notes about the plants he saw and sketches of strange patterns in the moss and tree bark. Occasionally, he would stop to rest, sitting on a rock or leaning against a tree, and just listen. The wind moved through the branches above, making a soft whispering sound. A squirrel darted across his path, stopping to look at him with bright, curious eyes. Everything felt peaceful, almost magical. But as the sun began to sink behind the hills, the forest's beauty started to change. Shadows grew longer, twisting between the trees. The paths that had seemed familiar in daylight now looked strange and confusing. James knew he needed to be careful, but he was still drawn further into the forest, eager to see what lay beyond the next ridge. He felt a thrill in his chest, a mix of excitement and a little fear. Eventually, James reached a rocky ravine that he had heard about from other explorers but had never dared to approach before. The rocks were jagged and covered in moss, and the ground seemed unstable. He carefully tested each step as he moved closer to the edge, his heart beating fast. The view below was breathtaking. A small, hidden valley stretched out, almost like a secret the forest was keeping. A narrow stream glittered in the fading sunlight, and patches of wildflowers dotted the ground. James wanted to get a closer look. Without thinking too much about the danger, he stepped onto a narrow ledge that sloped down toward the valley. At first, it held him, and he felt proud of himself for being brave. But then, as he shifted his weight, the rock beneath his foot crumbled. In an instant, James lost his balance. He tried to grab onto something, anything, but his fingers only, brushed against loose stones and thin branches that couldn't hold him. Gravity pulled him downward, and he tumbled into the crevice below. Pain shot through his body as he hit the rocks on the way down. He cried out, but his voice was swallowed by the forest. His arm bent awkwardly beneath him, and he felt the sharp sting of cuts and bruises. When he finally came to a stop, he lay on a patch of uneven ground, unable to move much. The world around him seemed distant and blurry. Pain throbbed in every part of him. His leg ached as though it had been broken, and his head felt light, almost dizzy. Every breath was difficult. For a moment, James simply lay there, stunned. He tried to call for help, but the sound of the forest was too loud, and no one was nearby to hear. Panic began to rise in him. The shadows deepened, and the cold began to seep into his bones. He realized that he was alone, truly alone, and that he might not survive if no one found him soon. Hours seemed to pass. He tried to move, to crawl toward what he hoped was safety, but every movement caused sharp pain. He thought about his family, his friends, and all the things he still wanted to do in life. Tears came to his eyes, partly from pain and partly from fear. He had always imagined himself as strong and capable, able to handle anything. But now, faced with real danger, he felt helpless in a way he had never known. As darkness settled around him, James noticed how quiet the forest had become. The usual sounds of birds and insects had faded, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The world seemed still, as if it were holding its breath. He felt the weight of his own body pressing down on him, and with each passing minute his strength seemed to drain a little more. He tried to hold on to hope. He thought about the times he had read stories of survival, of people finding ways to escape impossible situations. He remembered advice about staying calm, conserving energy, and waiting for help. But it was hard to stay calm when every breath hurt, when darkness pressed on all sides, and when he could feel the chill of night settling in. As he lay there, James reflected on the choices he had made. He had always wanted adventure to see, the world beyond the safe limits of his town. He had thought he could handle anything, but this fall had reminded him that life was fragile. Even the smallest mistake could have huge consequences. Yet, deep inside, a small spark of determination refused to die. He didn't want to give up. Not yet. Even as exhaustion threatened to overtake him, James kept his eyes open just enough to see the dim shapes of the forest above. He listened for any sign of life, any chance that someone might come looking for him. Hours stretched on, and his body ached unbearably. Yet, in the midst of pain and fear, a faint sense of something strange and almost magical began to stir inside. Him. He didn't know what it was, only that it made the darkness feel a little less heavy and the cold a little less sharp. James lay there, caught between fear and hope, pain and determination, night and the faint promise of dawn. He didn't know how long he could hold on, but one thing was clear. He was not ready to let life slip away. Somewhere in the forest, beyond the rocks and shadows, something was waiting, something he could not yet see. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would change everything. James lay in the crevice, his body aching and cold, the darkness pressing in from every side. He tried to focus on his breathing, reminding himself to stay calm. Every small movement hurt, but he refused to give in to despair. He had survived falls before, and though this one seemed worse than anything he had faced, he clung to a small spark of hope. The forest, which had seemed so familiar in daylight, was now strange and mysterious. Shadows stretched in unusual shapes, and every rustle of leaves made him flinch. As he tried to steady himself, he noticed a faint glimmer of light far above. At first, he thought it might be the moon, or perhaps the last sliver of sunlight shining through the trees. But the light was moving, slowly, deliberately. James's heart skipped a beat. He squinted through the darkness, trying to make sense of it. The light grew brighter and more distinct. It had a soft, golden glow, not harsh or blinding, but warm and inviting. It moved closer, gliding over the rocks with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. James blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. He had been alone in the forest for hours, exhausted and in pain. Was this a hallucination? Or was there really something there? As the glow approached, James noticed shapes emerging from the light. At first, he saw a silhouette, tall and elegant, with something flowing behind it. As it drew nearer, he realized that it was a creature unlike anything he had ever imagined. Its body was sleek, shimmering with soft colors that changed as it moved, gold, violet, and soft blues that glimmered like liquid light. Its most striking feature was a long tail that glowed like a stream of living fire, curling and twisting with life. The creature stopped a few feet away from him, observing James carefully. Its large eyes, deep and intelligent, met his gaze. James felt a strange calm wash over him. The pain in his body was still there, sharp and unrelenting, but the fear that had been clawing at him began to ease. It was as if the creature radiated reassurance, and somehow he understood that it meant no harm. He tried to speak, but his voice was weak and barely audible. Who are you?" he whispered. The creature didn't answer with words. Instead, a gentle vibration ran through James's mind, like a soft hum. The sound was comforting, soothing, and filled him with a sense of safety. He realized that this being could communicate in a way humans could not fully understand, a language of feeling rather than sound. The creature moved closer, carefully and without haste. Its glowing tail swayed behind it like a ribbon of light. When it drew near enough, James could see the intricate patterns of its skin, shimmering like polished gems. The forest seemed to fade around him, the shadows retreating as the light from the creature expanded. For the first time since his fall, James felt as though he was not alone, as though something extraordinary had entered his life just when he needed it most. It seemed to sense his fear and pain. James tried to shift slightly, wincing as the sharp pain in his leg reminded him of his broken bones. The creature's tail reached out, brushing gently against his shoulder. A warmth spread through his body, soft and steady, easing some of the pain. It wrapped slowly around him, not tightly, but with a protective embrace, as if it were saying, "I am here, and you are safe." James's mind raced. Who or what was this creature? How could it know he was hurt? How could it sense his fear? He had always believed in the mysteries of the world, but never in something like this. And yet, there it was, real and alive, glowing and breathing in the darkness of the forest. He wanted to touch it, to see if it was tangible, but he hesitated. The creature seemed so otherworldly that he feared even the gentlest contact might harm it or him. But then the creature lowered its head slightly, a gesture that James instinctively understood as trust. Slowly, carefully, he reached out his trembling hand. The moment his fingers brushed against its glowing fur, a wave of warmth and energy surged through him. It was not just heat. It was life itself flowing into him, filling the spaces where pain and fear had taken hold. James gasped, his eyes widening in astonishment. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was healing, comforting, and terrifying all at once. The forest around him seemed to respond to the light. Shadows retreated into the corners, and even the wind seemed to calm. Birds and insects, which had gone silent with the coming night, began to stir softly again. James realized that the creature's presence was more than just comforting. It was alive with a kind of power he could barely understand. It was as if the forest itself recognized it, and he was caught in the middle of something far larger than himself. James tried to speak again. You're saving me?" The creature did not answer directly. Instead, it wrapped its glowing tail gently around his neck, and a clear message entered his mind. "I will save you, but you will not be human again." The words sent a shiver through him. He froze, unsure what to do. To be saved meant survival, but at a cost he could barely imagine. Not being human again? What did that mean? Would he lose his body, his mind, his life as he had known it? Fear bubbled up, strong and cold, but beneath it, a part of him, a part that had always been brave, reckless, and desperate for life, pushed him forward. James knew he had little choice. He could remain in the darkness, alone and dying, or he could accept the unknown, place his life in the hands of this strange being, and see what lay ahead. His mind was filled with questions, doubts, and a flicker of hope that maybe, somehow, he would survive. With a trembling nod, he allowed the creature's tail to hold him fully. The warmth spread, seeping into his bones, mending tiny injuries, and easing the sharp pain of his broken leg. As the minutes passed, James felt the first real sense of relief he had experienced since the fall. He was not free of fear, but he felt a connection, a bond with this extraordinary creature. It seemed to know him better than he knew himself. The forest, the darkness, and even the cold were no longer enemies. They were witnesses to something miraculous. James closed his eyes, letting the glow surround him. He did not yet understand what lay ahead, what transformation might come, or what it meant to no longer be human. But in that moment, suspended between life and the unknown, he felt alive in a way he had never known before. The pain was still. There, the fear still lingered, but hope, warm, glowing, and radiant, filled the spaces between. The forest waited quietly around him, and the creature stayed close, as if guarding him against the night itself. For James, this was the beginning of something extraordinary. A journey beyond the limits of human understanding and a chance at survival that no one could have imagined. James could feel the glow of the creature's tail wrapped gently around his neck. The warmth spread through his body like sunlight pouring over cold stones. Every part of him ached, every muscle burned, and yet the pain felt softer somehow, as if it were being carried away by the light itself. He opened his eyes and looked at the creature. Its shimmering body seemed to pulse with life, colors shifting and dancing in a rhythm that he could almost feel in his heartbeat. For a moment, James simply stared, unsure if what was happening was real. The forest around him felt both distant and alive, as if it had stepped back to let this being focus entirely on him. The tail remained gently wrapped around him, and James felt a steadying presence he could not explain. He tried to speak, but words failed him. All he could do was look into the creature's eyes, and in those deep, glowing eyes, he sensed something powerful. Understanding, awareness, and perhaps even empathy. Then he heard it, not with his ears, but in his mind. A voice soft and strange, unlike anything he had ever heard. It wasn't spoken aloud, but the meaning was clear. "I can save you, James. I can bring you back from the edge of death. But you must understand. You will not be the same again." James's heart skipped. He tried to respond, but the words were tangled in his throat. He shook his head weakly, almost as if to say, "I don't understand." The creature's glow brightened slightly, and the warmth intensified. Then the words came again, this time more insistent. "I will save you. But you will not be human again." Fear surged through him like a cold wave. What did it mean? Not human? Would he lose his body, his mind, his memories? Could he even survive such a thing? His thoughts spun out of control for a moment, yet beneath the fear, a small but steady voice inside him whispered, "I want to live." James realized that this was the choice he had been given, the chance to survive, even if it came at a cost he could not yet fully understand. He thought about everything he loved, the forest, the feeling of being alive, the people who cared about him. He could die here, in the cold, dark crevice, alone and fading, or he could take this chance, step into the unknown, and trust the glowing creature to guide him. Slowly, he nodded. He tried to speak, to tell the creature that he would accept whatever it required, but the words came out only as a weak whisper. I trust you." Immediately, the warmth of the tail shifted, moving to hold him more firmly yet tenderly. James felt a gentle pressure, not painful, but firm, anchoring him. The energy in the creature's tail seemed to flow into him, sinking into every muscle, every bone, every cell. At first it was subtle, like tiny sparks dancing under his skin. Then it grew stronger, more insistent, filling him with a sense of life he had never known. Pain began to fade. His broken leg ached less. His bruises seemed to melt under the glow. The exhaustion that had weighed down his body like a heavy blanket was lifting, Yet at the same time, something strange was happening. James could feel himself changing. It started subtly, his senses sharpening in ways he could not describe. He could hear the rustle of leaves far away, the soft flight of a bird in the distance, even the heartbeat of a small animal hidden in the underbrush. His vision widened. Colors became more vivid, details sharper. He felt energy coursing through him in waves, and though it was exhilarating, it was also frightening. He was no longer certain that he recognized himself. He looked down at his hands. At first they looked the same, but then he noticed a faint shimmer, like a ripple of light moving across his skin. It was as if the glow from the creature had seeped into him, changing him at a level deeper than he could see. He flexed his fingers and felt an unfamiliar strength. His senses were alive in a way that felt new and almost overwhelming. He realized that the creature had kept its promise. He was being saved, but the cost was already beginning. He would not remain the same. Fear returned for a moment, sharp and cold. What was happening to him? Was he losing his humanity? Would he ever return to the life he had known? The simple life of school, friends, and home? The questions swirled in his mind, but they were soon pushed aside by a different feeling: trust. The creature's eyes met his again, and James felt that it understood the fear and doubt inside him. It did not force him. It only guided, only offered a path forward. The tail shifted again, brushing across his chest, and James felt a strange, calm descend. It was not simply comfort. It was a sense of purpose, a feeling that he was part of something larger than himself. The forest around him seemed to respond, the darkness receding slightly, as if the glow of the creature and the life within him were pushing back the shadows. For the first time since his fall, James felt hope, not just for survival, but for the chance to become something extraordinary. He wanted to speak again, to ask questions, but the creature communicated without words. It sent images and sensations directly into his mind. Glimpses of the forest, the flowing energy of life, the connection between all living things. He understood in a way beyond language that this transformation was not a curse. It was a new beginning. It would change him, yes, but it would also give him abilities and understanding far beyond human limits. James realized he had a choice at every moment. He could pull back, refuse the creature's help, and face death in the dark crevice. Or he could surrender to the light, embrace the unknown, and trust that this being had chosen him for a reason. He thought about all the moments he had loved the forest, the feeling of being alive in the quiet, the thrill of exploration. He wanted that life to continue, no matter the cost. Finally, he made his decision. He closed his eyes and allowed the creature's tail to hold him completely. The warmth, the light, and the energy surged into him fully. Pain and fear mingled with awe and wonder as his body continued to change. He could feel the life inside him growing stronger, reshaping him, giving him power and awareness he had never known. He was not human anymore, not in the way he had been. But he was alive, and that was all that mattered. The forest around him remained silent and watchful. The glowing creature stayed close, its tail still wrapped gently around James. He could feel the connection between them deepening, a bond that went beyond words or understanding. He was changing, growing, transforming, but he was not alone. He was being guided, protected, and given a chance that few could ever imagine. And in that quiet, glowing moment, James realized something important. Life was not just about survival. It was about growth, about discovery, about trusting in the unknown and embracing the extraordinary when it appeared. He had been on the edge of death, alone and terrified, and now he was standing on the threshold of something incredible. He did not yet understand the full cost or the full potential of what was happening to him, but he knew that he had chosen life, and nothing would ever be the same again. The warmth of the glowing creature's tail continued to flow into James, moving through his body like a river of light. At first, the sensation was gentle, almost soothing, and he felt the sharpest pains of his fall begin to ease. His broken leg throbbed less, his cuts and bruises stung less, and the exhaustion that had weighed him down for hours seemed to lift, replaced by a strange, vibrant energy. But as the minutes passed, the feeling grew stronger, almost overwhelming. It was as if the light was not just healing him, it was changing him, reshaping his very being in ways he could barely understand. James tried to move his hands and arms. At first they felt like his own, though heavier and tingling with energy he had never felt before. But as he flexed his fingers, a faint shimmer began to appear on his skin, like sunlight dancing across water. He stared at his hands, wide-eyed, unsure what was happening. The glow on his skin shifted with his movements, wrapping around him like a second skin, soft and luminous. Every nerve seemed alive with sensation, every muscle humming with new strength. He realized then that he was no longer entirely human in the way he had been. The creature observed him closely, its large, intelligent eyes reflecting the flickering colors of his transformation. James tried to speak, but his voice trembled. What's happening to me?" The answer did not come in words, but in feeling, a wave of understanding flowing into his mind. "You are alive, and stronger than before. You are becoming part of the life around you, part of the energy that flows through all things. You are changing, yes, but it is not a curse. You are being given a second life." James took a shaky breath. His fear had not completely vanished. He did not fully understand what he was becoming, and that uncertainty made his heart pound. But beneath the fear was excitement, a spark of wonder at the impossible beauty and power unfolding within him. He flexed his arms again and noticed that he could feel even the tiniest vibrations around him. The movement of leaves, the pulse of the stream far below, the distant call of a bird hidden in the canopy. His senses were sharper than he had ever known, and he could almost feel the life of the forest itself as if it were a living, breathing presence around him. The creature's tail adjusted, wrapping more fully around him now, holding him gently, yet firmly. James could feel the energy moving up his spine, through his chest, and into his head. The tingling in his hands and feet spread to every part of his body. Colors appeared brighter, sounds sharper, and even the air seemed alive with movement and vibration. He tried to stand carefully, testing his strength. His legs felt stronger, more responsive, yet something about them was different. Lighter, yet more solid, as if he was walking not just on his own weight, but with the support of the energy flowing through him. He looked around at the forest. Everything seemed clearer, more vivid. He could see the smallest details on leaves, the subtle movements of insects far away, the texture of rocks covered in moss. Every sound, from the distant call of a bird to the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, came through as if magnified and distinct. He could even sense the presence of animals hidden from view, their movements and emotions flowing into him in a way he had never imagined possible. The world had transformed into something alive, vibrant, and full of energy, just as he had been transformed. For a moment, James panicked. This was more than healing. He was no longer just a boy who had fallen in the forest. He was something else, something stronger, sharper, and attuned to the life around him. The thought of losing his humanity completely frightened him. Would he still recognize himself? Would he ever return to the life he had known? But then, as he looked into the creature's glowing eyes, he felt a sense of calm and reassurance. He was not alone. Whatever he was becoming, he was being guided and protected by this being who had chosen him. The forest itself seemed to respond to his presence. Leaves quivered as he passed, Small animals froze, sensing his energy but not fleeing. Even the wind seemed to move differently, brushing gently against him as if acknowledging his new state. James felt an overwhelming connection to everything around him. The trees, the stones, the water, the creatures. It was as if the forest was alive, in a way he had never understood before, and he was now a part of its heartbeat. James began to test his new abilities cautiously. He reached out, and the forest responded. A rock shifted slightly beneath his touch. A small bird fluttered nearby, and the stream's surface shimmered as if it recognized him. He felt power and awareness flowing through him, not as a weapon or threat, but as understanding. He could sense danger, life, and motion in ways that humans could never naturally perceive. The forest felt familiar yet new, as if he had been blind before and was now seeing with a new kind of sight. Time passed differently for him. Minutes felt like hours, yet every second brought new awareness and strength. His body no longer ached, in the way it had moments before, though he could feel the energy of his transformation continuing to ripple through him. James realized that the creature's promise had come true. He had survived, but he was no longer entirely human. He had been given a second life, one that came with incredible abilities, heightened senses, and a deep connection to the natural world. Even as he marveled at the changes, James felt a quiet weight in his mind. He would never return to the life he had known, the life of a boy exploring forests in simple human ways. That life was gone. But this new existence, filled with possibility, connection, and power, was something he could embrace. He was alive in a way he had never been before, and every part of him pulsed with energy, curiosity, and a strange sense of wonder. The glowing creature remained close, tail still wrapped around him, as if to remind him that he was not alone in this journey. James felt gratitude and awe. He had fallen into a crevice, broken and helpless, but he had emerged into something extraordinary. The pain, fear, and uncertainty had not disappeared completely, but they had been transformed into awareness, energy, and possibility. He was alive, changed, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. Finally, James stood fully, feeling his new strength. His senses guided him as he moved carefully, exploring the forest from his transformed perspective. Every movement, every sound, every light around him seemed amplified, teaching him about the world in ways he had never imagined. The forest was no longer just a place to explore. It was a living, breathing companion, and he was now part of its rhythm. In that quiet, glowing moment, James realized the full truth of what had happened. He had survived the fall, been healed, and transformed. He was no longer the boy who had walked through the forest hours ago, but something new, something extraordinary. The journey ahead would be different, and perhaps difficult, but he was ready to embrace it, guided by the glowing creature that had saved him and the incredible life that now flowed through him. James stood in the forest, still wrapped gently in the glowing creature's tail, feeling the pulse of energy flowing through him. The sun had almost disappeared behind the hills, leaving a soft twilight that made the forest appear magical. Every sound, every movement, every color was heightened in his senses. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves far above, the call of a distant owl, the movement of small animals hidden in the undergrowth. He could feel the energy of the earth beneath him, the flowing water of the stream, and the rhythm of life around him in a way he had never experienced before. The first hours after his transformation had been overwhelming. James had struggled to understand the changes in his body and mind. Movements that had once been automatic now required new awareness, and the flood of sensory input made his head spin. But gradually, he began to adjust. He learned to move carefully, to focus on the strongest sensations first, to listen and observe without being distracted. Each small success gave him confidence, and each moment of understanding made him feel more connected to the world around him. The glowing creature stayed by his side, wrapping its tail around him at intervals, providing warmth, energy, and reassurance. It guided him gently, showing him the rhythms of the forest, the safest paths, the hidden sources of water, the places where animals gathered. James discovered that he could sense these patterns intuitively, almost like the forest itself was speaking to him. He realized that he was learning to live in a new way, not as a human alone, but as part of the life around him. He tested his new abilities carefully. He could move faster than he ever had, climb the rocks and trees with strength and precision, and sense even the faintest movements nearby. At first, it was frightening. The power inside him was new, unfamiliar, and unpredictable. But over time, he learned to control it, to direct it, to use it to move safely through the forest and observe the world without harming it. Every success brought a sense of pride and amazement. He was alive in a way that went beyond mere survival. He was thriving. James also noticed changes in his thoughts and emotions. He could feel the moods of the animals nearby, the subtle shifts in the forest's energy, and even the emotions of people who came close to the forest's edge. It was strange and beautiful, a gift that made him feel deeply connected to everything. He realized that his life had expanded far beyond what he had known as a human. He was part of something larger, something alive and vibrant, and the forest had become his home in a way that it never had before. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, yet James no longer counted time the way he used to. Each moment was full of observation, learning, and wonder. He discovered that he could communicate with the glowing creature in ways beyond words. The creature showed him places deep within the forest, hidden valleys, clear streams, and high cliffs that overlooked the entire landscape. James explored these places, sensing the life within them, understanding the balance and harmony of the forest. As he adapted to his new life, James realized that the fear and pain of his fall had transformed into something else: gratitude, awareness, and purpose. He had been given a second chance, not merely to survive, but to live fully in a way that few humans could ever experience. He remembered the moments before the fall, the panic, the darkness, the despair. Now he felt a profound appreciation for life, for every sound, every scent, every movement. The gift of survival had come with a cost, yes, but it had also brought him something extraordinary. James began to notice the animals of the forest reacting differently to him. Birds no longer fled at his approach. Small mammals moved confidently nearby. He realized that they could sense the change within him, the energy that flowed from the glowing creature, and now through him as well. He felt a responsibility, a gentle duty, to protect and respect the forest and its inhabitants. He was no longer just a visitor. He was part of this world in a new and meaningful way. Over time, James also discovered that he could sense danger before it arrived. He could feel the subtle vibrations of the earth and the air, notice shifts in movement or energy that humans could not perceive. This ability was not just thrilling, it was practical. He could avoid hazards, guide himself safely through the forest, and help the creatures around him live without fear. He felt a sense of mastery and responsibility, understanding that his life was intertwined with the life of the forest and all its creatures. Despite his incredible abilities, James never forgot his humanity entirely. He remembered his family, his friends, and the world beyond the forest. Those memories were bittersweet. He could not return to them as he had been, yet they reminded him of the person he once was. He realized that being different did not mean losing himself entirely. It meant evolving, growing, and finding a new place in the world. He could embrace his new life without forgetting his past. The glowing creature remained his guide and companion. James grew to trust it completely, understanding that it had chosen him not randomly, but because it sensed something within him, a courage, a curiosity, and a willingness to survive against all odds. The creature had given him life when it might have been simpler to leave him behind. James felt gratitude and loyalty in return, and a bond formed between them that went beyond words or comprehension. They were partners, in a sense, moving through the forest together, exploring, learning, and protecting life. As the days and weeks passed, James began to explore further, venturing to parts of the forest he had never known. He discovered hidden valleys, waterfalls, and caves that seemed to glow faintly with the same energy as the creature. He could sense the patterns of life in these places, the connections between the plants, animals, and the earth itself. Every step was a lesson, every moment a revelation. He was no longer simply surviving. He was thriving in a way that was beyond human experience. In the quiet moments, James reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the fall, the fear, and the despair that had gripped him. He remembered the glowing creature and its warning, that he would not be human again. And he realized that those words had not been a curse. They had been an invitation to something greater, to a life filled with wonder, connection, and extraordinary experience. He had survived, transformed, and found a place in the world that was deeper, richer, and more alive than he could have imagined. By the time the forest was bathed in the soft light of dawn, James felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced death and fear, embraced the unknown, and emerged transformed. His body, mind, and senses had changed, but so had his heart. He was alive in a way that went beyond survival. He was part of life itself, connected to everything around him, and guided by a being that had given him a second chance. He understood now that life's true magic was not in remaining the same, but in adapting, growing, and discovering the extraordinary in every moment. James took a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of the forest and the energy flowing through him. The glowing creature nudged him gently with its tail, a silent gesture of approval and companionship. He smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reflected relief, wonder, and acceptance. He had been given an impossible gift, life, transformed and renewed, and he would live it fully, with courage, gratitude, and awe, embracing every moment in this new and extraordinary existence.